The host lobbed softballs at first. Questions about their early days, the roles that defined them, the directors they'd outlasted. Pacino's voice, gravelly but animated, spun stories of New York's gritty theater scene, his hands slicing the air as he spoke. Eastwood, more reserved, offered clipped anecdotes about spaghetti westerns, his drawl steady, almost dismissive. The crowd laughed, nodded, ate it up. But the air shifted when Eastwood leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate, cutting through the polite rhythm. You lived like fire, Al. Burned bright, sure. But how many people got scorched standing too close while you blazed? The room froze. Pacino's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as if he'd been slapped. He leaned in, voice sharp but controlled. At least I lived, Clint. Didn't hide behind some cowboy myth, bottling it all up until there's nothing left inside but echoes. The host tried to steer back to safer ground, tossing out a question about family, and for a moment, they obliged. Pacino talking about his kids with a wistful pride, Eastwood mentioning his own with a curt nod. But the tension hung like smoke, and the audience could feel it, their whispers quieting as they sensed something bigger brewing. Eastwood wasn't done. He waited, letting the small talk fade, then struck again, his voice colder now. 8 kids, 6 women, Al. That's a lot of promises. Control, or just scared of real closeness? Pacino's face flushed, his hands gripping the armrest like he might launch himself across the couch. Don't lecture me, Clint. I didn't hide behind pretty words about love when I couldn't stay true for more than a season. The crowd gasped, a low ripple of shock, as the host fumbled to keep things civil, but the gloves were off. Pacino's words cut deep, and Eastwood's eyes glinted with something dangerous. Not anger, not yet, but a challenge, a dare to keep pushing. The cameras zoomed in, catching every micro-expression, every twitch of a jaw, as the two men sat there exposed, raw, and unyielding, the weight of their lives and choices hanging between them. This wasn't just a talk show anymore. It was a reckoning, and no one in the room could look away, knowing the real storm was still coming. The host, sensing the moment slipping beyond his control, tried to pivot, tossing out a question about their views on modern Hollywood, but Eastwood ignored it, his eyes fixed on Pacino like a gunslinger sizing up an opponent. We're losing America, Al, he said, his voice low, deliberate, cutting through the room like a blade. Kids today listen to the wrong voices, soft voices, scared of truth. You think a man's has still got the right to be tough? Or are you worried they'll cancel you for it? The jab landed hard, and the crowd stirred, working the conversation back to politics. Pacino's lips twitched, not quite a smile, more a grimace of defiance. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice steady but laced with heat. I'm not afraid of any culture, Clint, or any crowd. What scares me is going deaf to the times. You, though, you're still stuck in the 70s, aren't you? Back when men thought hiding their feelings made them strong. The audience gasped, some clapping nervously, others frozen, as the two titans clashed not just as actors but as men wrestling with their legacies. Eastwood's face didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the armrest, knuckles whitening. Feelings, he said, almost spitting the word. You think spilling your guts makes you real? How many of your kids ever thanked you for that, Al? Or are they too busy dodging the shadow of your fire? Pacino's eyes flashed, and for a moment it looked like he might stand, his body coiled like a spring. Don't you dare, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, sharp enough to cut glass. You want to talk shadows? How many of yours look at you and see a statue instead of a father? Thank you isn't words, Clint. You said it yourself. It's when they don't break because they saw you stand. But what if they're breaking because you never bent? The crowd was silent now, the air electric with the rawness of it, every word a blade slicing deeper into old wounds. The host, visibly sweating, tried to interject, but neither man acknowledged him, their focus locked on each other like two old wolves circling. Eastwood leaned back, his squint narrowing, and after a long pause he spoke, his voice quieter but heavy with conviction. A man stands, Al. That's what keeps the world from falling apart. You bend too much. You break everything around you. Pacino shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. And you think standing still saves it? You're not a rock, Clint. You're just scared to move. The exchange hung there, unresolved, as the host finally managed to cut in, redirecting to politics again, but the shift only poured fuel on the fire. Eastwood, his jaw set, turned the conversation to the state of the country, his words clipped and pointed. People want heroes, not victims. They want men who do what's right, not what feels good. You disagree? Pacino's eyes narrowed, sensing the trap but diving in anyway. Heroes? You mean men who play the part until the cameras stop? I'd rather be flawed and honest than pretend I've got all the answers. The audience leaned in, some nodding, others whispering, as the debate veered into a deeper, more personal abyss. Eastwood's voice grew sharper. Honest? You call running from one life to the next honest? How many times did you walk away when it got hard? Pacino's face darkened, his hands balling into fists. And how many times did you stay, Clint, just to prove you could? Staying's not love if it's just pride. The room felt like it might combust. Every word a spark, every pause a moment where the audience held its breath, waiting for the next blow. The host, desperate, tried to lighten the mood, asking about their proudest moments as fathers, but the question only deepened the wound. Pacino spoke first, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. My kids, they're my heart. I wasn't perfect, but I gave them everything I had, even when it wasn't enough. Eastwood's response was slower, measured, but no less cutting. Mine don't need my heart. They need my spine. Always have. The contrast was stark, and the audience could feel the chasm between them, not just in philosophy, but in pain, in the choices they'd made and the ones they'd run from. The cameras caught every flicker of emotion, Pacino's restless intensity, Eastwood's unyielding calm, and the tension built like a storm cloud ready to burst. As the segment neared its end, Eastwood leaned forward again, his voice almost a growl. You talk about honesty, Al, but how many times did you look in the mirror and see someone you didn't recognize? Pacino didn't flinch, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt, a crack in his armor. At least I looked, he shot back. You're still staring at the same damn horizon, waiting for a world that doesn't exist anymore. The audience was riveted, phones forgotten, eyes glued to the stage, knowing they were witnessing something rare. Two giants, stripped bare, their flaws and truths laid out like an open wound. The host, sensing the moment was too raw to push further, called for a commercial break, but the cameras lingered just a second too long, catching Pacino's clenched jaw and Eastwood's unreadable stare. A promise that this wasn't over, that something bigger was still to come. The host, now visibly rattled, tried to steer the conversation to neutral ground, asking about their latest projects. But the words felt hollow, a flimsy dam against the flood of what had already been said. Pacino ignored the question, his voice cutting through the host's forced cheer. You want to know what keeps me up at night, Clint? It's not the roles I didn't take or the fights I lost. It's wondering if my kids ever felt they had to compete with the man on the screen. His voice cracked, just for a moment, and the audience leaned forward, caught by the raw honesty of a man who'd spent decades bearing his soul for cameras but rarely for himself. Eastwood's face didn't soften, but his eyes flickered, a shadow of something. Regret, maybe, passing through. You think you're the only one who wonders that? He said, his voice quieter now, almost confessional. Every time I look at mine, I ask if they saw me or the myth. But I didn't build the myth, Al. The world did. The crowd was silent, the weight of their words sinking in. Two men who'd shaped generations now, grappling with the cost of their own legends. The host, sensing a chance to pivot, asked about legacy, but Eastwood cut him off, his voice sharp again. Legacy's a trap. It's what people say when they're too scared to look at the mess they left behind. You tell me, Al, how many messes did you leave? Pacino's eyes blazed, but his response was measured, each word heavy. Plenty, but I owned them. You? You act like you're above it all, like your mistakes don't bleed. The accusation hung in the air, and for a moment, it seemed the room might fracture under the strain. Then, in a move that stunned everyone, Pacino stood, his small frame electric with purpose, and walked toward Eastwood. The audience gasped, the cameras swiveling, the host frozen. But Pacino didn't swing or shout. He stopped a foot away, looking down at Eastwood, who hadn't moved, his squint unyielding. "You're wrong about one thing, Clint," Pacino said, his voice low, almost tender. "I don't think you're empty. I think you're full, of everything you won't let out." Eastwood's jaw twitched, the faintest crack in his armor, and for a heartbeat, the two men stood there, the weight of decades, rivalries, triumphs, failures, hanging between them. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the explosion, but instead, Eastwood rose slowly, his height towering over Pacino, and extended a hand. "Maybe you're right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe we're both too old to keep pretending we've got it all figured out." Pacino looked at the hand, then at Eastwood's face, and after a long pause, he took it, their grip firm but brief. The audience erupted, not in cheers, but in a stunned release as if they'd all been holding their breath for hours. The host, seizing the moment, rushed to wrap the show, his voice shaky as he thanked them. But the cameras lingered on the two men, now seated again, their faces unreadable but changed, like warriors after a battle with no victor. As the lights dimmed and the crowd began to file out, whispers spread that it had all been a stunt, a scripted clash to go viral. But those who'd felt the raw edge of their words weren't so sure. Pacino and Eastwood didn't speak as they left the stage, each retreating to their own corner of the world, leaving behind a moment that felt too real to be staged, too heavy to be just a show. No one knew if they'd meet again, or if this was the last time two giants would stand so close, their truths laid bare, their wounds still open, their hands briefly clasped in a gesture that might have been peace, or just a pause before the next storm.